Welcome to the Introduction to jQuery course. My name is Dan Wallin with Pluralsight, and in this course I'm going to walk you through the different technologies and techniques you need to know to use jQuery in your web applications, have fun doing it, and just be more productive as a web developer. So in this first module, we're going to talk about some of the jQuery fundamentals that you need to get started. If you've already referenced scripts and know quite a bit about jQuery but just wanted to learn more, then you can probably skip ahead to module 2. If you're starting from scratch and want to get going with it from the ground up, then this will be a good module to go through. Now before we go too much further, let's talk about some of the prereqs that you'll need to know to get the most out of this course. So first off, we are going to use JavaScript a lot. So if you have experience with JavaScript, highly recommend it. If you know how to work with the different squiggly brackets, call functions, create objects, those types of things. You don't have to be an expert at it, but you definitely need to know the fundamentals of the language to get the most out of this course. You definitely need to know HTML. jQuery is all about manipulating HTML, and that's what we're going to talk about throughout the whole course and all the different modules. And then finally, you'll want to know at least the fundamentals of cascading style sheets. Now, you don't have to be an expert at it, but we will be talking about how to manipulate styles, classes, and other CSS things using jQuery as well. So now that we've talked about that, let's jump into our first module here and look at the agenda. So first thing we're going to do is introduce why would you want to go with jQuery at all. I mean, there's a lot of different options out there, from MooTools to Prototype, Yahoo UI, and more. So why choose jQuery? We'll talk about some of the different things that make it so popular these days. We'll then talk about the fundamentals of how do you reference a jQuery script. Number one, where do you get it? How do you put it into your page so you can use it? And then where do you go from there? We'll also tie in different ways to load jQuery scripts into your page, and we'll talk about content delivery networks. Google, Microsoft, and others have different content delivery networks out there that make it very efficient for getting jQuery scripts into your pages, especially if you're doing an internet type app. Now, if you're doing intranet, you may or may not need this. It just depends. But we'll talk about what it is and why you'd care about it. From there, we'll jump into our first jQuery syntax, and we'll talk about the ready function. This is one of the first things you'll need to learn. And the ready function, in a nutshell, is used to let you know when a page has officially loaded, or at least the DOM has loaded, and we'll talk about that. And then finally, every good jQuery developer I know out there is good at reading through the documentation. I'd love to say I've memorized every single API out there, but some of them you just don't use that much. And so when they come up, you need to know quickly where to go to get the details, how to call the functions, the different parameters you'd pass, JSON objects, those types of things. So we'll talk about that as well and explain some of the fundamentals of how to get through the jQuery documentation, which is very good, by the way. Okay, so let's talk about getting started with jQuery. So first off, what is jQuery? Well, it's just a script library. So it's just a .js file. If you've created a custom JS file before, it's really no different. It just has a lot more functionality. And the reason it's so popular nowadays is it provides an excellent opportunity to work in a cross-browser way. Now, if you only have to target one browser, you'll still get benefits out of it, huge benefits, especially when we talk about selectors. One of the first things we'll learn, which will be the next module, is the concept of selecting DOM objects as they load it up into the memory. So selecting HTML stuff, objects, is what jQuery is all about. You're going to write custom selector statements, and these selector statements are very simple statements, expressions, whatever you want to call them, that allow you to find things easily. So for example, if we had a bunch of span tags and we want to find them based on certain characteristics, we don't actually have to loop through the whole DOM to find those. So I'll show you how to do that and how that works. Okay, events are a big deal in web apps. We need to know when they click a button or when they mouse over or mouse leave and those types of things. jQuery provides very, very good cross-browser event handling, and it allows you to get to data in those events, such as mouse events with the XY coordinates of where they clicked. Animation is another big part of the jQuery library, and this is some of the more fun stuff, I think, because if you ever want to just make your page a little snazzier, make it so something expands as the page loads, make it something so maybe some words fade in and out. You might want to animate the height and width of a particular div. All that type of stuff plus more can be done with the jQuery script library, and it's fun to do actually. There's a lot of great examples of this out there on the web. Now, one of my personal favorite features is Ajax support, and that's because I happen to build a lot of client applications with our company that we need Ajax. We don't want the page to reload every time the user blinks. So jQuery has excellent support built in for this, and you can do GET or POST requests. You can get JSON data, you can get XML data, raw HTML data, and then update the DOM and do whatever you need to do with that data. So very, very powerful part of jQuery, and we'll have a whole module just on that particular subject. Okay, the final thing is jQuery's, it's great. It has cross-browser support, it has selectors to find things in the DOM very easily, all the stuff I just talked about, but one of the reasons it's so popular is there are thousands of plugins out there now, and these are actually little scripts that you can integrate into your pages. They kind of piggyback on jQuery. They add additional functionality, they extend it, so that you can do cool things like turn a table into a sortable grid. Or you might want to have form validation that's greatly simplified over writing custom code to do it. You might have some animation things you want to do as well. And the sky's the limit here. There's all kinds of examples of plugins out there that you can integrate into your websites using jQuery. Now, all that stuff's great, and those are some of the highlights of jQuery. But from my perspective, one of the things it did for me, having worked with web technologies for many years now, is it just brought the fun back into it when dealing with cross-browser issues. And here's why. Ask yourself these questions. How do you locate elements with a specific class on those elements? So how do you take a div and say, hey, go find all the divs who have a class or that have a class of foo, let's say? Well, you could do that with custom JavaScript, but you'd have to loop through all the DOM elements, find the divs, write an if statement as you're looping to check the class, and then write code to manipulate it, and then you got to worry about cross-browser. With jQuery, you can do something like that with a very small single line of code. It's very, very simple once you know the fundamentals. How do you apply styles to multiple elements? We might go in and want to change the font size, or you might want to change a background color, or whatever it may be. Again, you could do that with custom JavaScript. I've done it for years before I learned jQuery, but it's definitely easier and more productive with jQuery. How do you go in and handle different events in a cross-browser manner? And this is where it gets a little bit of a kind of a tricky operation, especially Internet Explorer versus pretty much all the others. Now it's very simple. Handling events is one simple operation you can do. You use the jQuery API, and you're good to go. So the question you can ask yourself is, number one, do you want to keep all your hair? Or if that's already gone, do you want to bang your head against the monitor? Because cross-browser issues can definitely drive you crazy and definitely minimize your productivity. So if you spend a lot of hours doing that, you're in the right place. jQuery is a great way to go. I've been using it for years, and there's just no going back once you learn how this library works. It truly is awesome. My favorite thing, though, it really, as I mentioned previously, it really just brings back the fun, I think, to development in the web world, especially if you're focusing on client-side type development. Whereas before you had to worry about all the cross-browser issues and new browsers coming out and all that fun, once you learn jQuery, you learn it once, you apply what you learned, and you just don't have to worry quite as much, not nearly as much, as we used to when we wrote custom JavaScript. So that's some of the highlights of jQuery and why I think it's such a great library to go with.